National Signing Day is just 2 days away. So much to talk about on the front of Oklahoma football. Let's get right to it. Sooners Live. Leave your comments and questions right here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Parker Thune. KREF Sports is your destination every Monday through Friday, 12 to 3 Central Time. You can catch Parker's work also at OU Insider on Rivals. Parker, I hesitate to ask what's going on because you'll probably flood me for the next 5 hours with stuff. So that's why we've got you here.
Oh, a lot's going on, Mark. Just as we were getting ready to hit record on this live session, the Sooners picked up a commitment in the transfer portal from former Southeastern Louisiana tight end Bauer Sharp. He was one of the most nationally coveted players in the portal at that particular position. So big get for Oklahoma. They add that to a haul that already includes Purdue wide receiver Deion Burks, who was the top available wideout in the transfer market. Michigan State offensive tackle Spencer Brown, who's a plug-and-play starter, as well as the likes of San Diego State cornerback Desjon Malone, one of the most athletic G5 cornerback prospects and productive G5 cornerback prospects available in the portal market this offseason. So strong early returns in that department for Oklahoma, and of course, early signing day is just 2 days away. Oklahoma is expected to sign most, if not all, of their 2024 recruiting class come Wednesday.
You gave us a nice little thumbnail on the current commits coming in from other Power 5 programs and other G5 schools as well, and then the one that just came down. So the Michigan State offensive lineman appears, based on what I've looked at, to be a guy that can come in and factor in heavily in the rotation. I'm familiar with Deion Burks, saw him play a lot of football at Purdue. He was a highly productive receiver, even though they were less than prolific passing the football as they had been earlier with Aiden O'Connell with the switch to Hudson Card. So highly productive players. That should be the anticipation here with some of these most recent transfers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you're looking for at a place like Oklahoma when you're perusing the transfer portal, right, Mark? If you're a school of Oklahoma's caliber, you're looking for guys that can come in and be instant impact dudes. 2 years ago, Oklahoma was in a position where, with the roster turnover, with the staff turnover, which is with as much uncertainty as there was surrounding that program circa December 2021, January of 2022, they were in a position where it made sense to take a few flyers in the transfer portal. Not the case anymore. They've got a good portion of their offensive starting lineup and their defensive starting lineup returning in 2023. So if you're looking for dudes in the portal that can actually meaningfully raise the bottom line for this Oklahoma program, you're going to be looking at guys who have done it at a high level and who have been exceedingly productive at whatever level they have played. Bauer Sharp comes from FCS Southeastern Louisiana. Excuse me. So not a guy that necessarily has a ton of experience playing Power 5 opponents, but the athletic tools and traits to be an immediate contributor for this program. And again, you're not taking dudes that you expect to pan out 2-3 years down the road. You're taking dudes that are short-term stopgaps, immediate solutions at positions of need. And the Sooners appear to have gotten that in every single one of the guys that they've brought in via the portal so far.
Well, Parker, here's a guy that certainly has not matched up with that kind of competition in regards to a full team, but I'm sure he has certainly played alongside and against and certainly attended camps where those 4- and 5-star quality type guys are. And it's the most recent commit, a Rivals top 30 player in the nation, Eddie Pierre Lewis, I guess is how you pronounce. So we'll go with the standard pronunciation. Eddie Pierre Lewis, top 30 defensive lineman, 6'4", about 320 out of Tampa. And Oklahoma lures him away from all the Florida schools and the SEC schools going after him.
Yeah, that was a big get for Oklahoma. Somewhat unexpected, and I say that, and I'm not necessarily using the standard definition of the term unexpected, because Oklahoma was the dream school for Eddie Pierre Lewis, was the school that he had always fantasized about getting an offer from. But yet, throughout the recruitment process, Mark, he only visited Oklahoma once. It was an OV back in June. And this fall, he tentatively scheduled a couple of game day unofficials with Oklahoma and then simply didn't show up. So there was a lot of buzz that perhaps he would just stay home, play for UCF. They were the other top contender for his pledge. But in the end, Bill Bedenbaugh's track record and just the overall feeling, the one trip that he did make to Oklahoma, that was enough to convince Eddie Pierre-Louis that he could blaze his own trail 1,000 miles from home and that he could make it work at Oklahoma. So the Sooners beat out UCF in what was a very, very unique recruiting process and a dragged out one at that. Again, he did not end up making the final decision until December 15th, some 3 days ago. So per our Rivals rankings, he is now the highest ranked offensive pledge in Oklahoma's 2024 class. And when you look at some of the athletic traits, the testing numbers, he benched 225 pounds 25 times this summer at an OT7 event. Mark, for context, the Sooners had a first rounder at offensive tackle this past year in Anton Harrison, who put up 225 24 times at his pro day. Not only that, Eddie Pierre-Louis is a guy who runs a sub 13 second 100 meters at 320 pounds. So not your run-of-the-mill offensive line prospect by any means. The ceiling is very, very high there.
And just to underline, we're talking first-round pick, and we're talking about being in a college, a upper-tier elite strength and conditioning program for 3 or 4 years. That's a crazy comparison to make right there. Parker Thunes here from KREF Sports. 12 to 3 is your destination Monday through Friday, 12 to 3 Central Time. OU Insiders on Rivals. Of course, National Signing Day coming up on Wednesday. Rivals ranking for Oklahoma right now, number 6 with 31 commits. And Eddie Pierre-Louis, the most recent and at the top of the board. I asked you this last week, Parker. I'm going to hit you with it again. Can we expect, or is there a possibility of anyone slipping in here in the last 48 hours?
I doubt it, Mark. Really, at this point in the process, the only guy that Oklahoma is still pursuing that remains uncommitted to them in the 2024 class would be 5-star defensive lineman Dominic McKinley out of the state of Louisiana. He is currently pledged to Texas A&M. That commitment is not as secure as it once was. And in fact, McKinley is planning on taking his recruitment into February. Obviously, National Signing Day is in February. Early Signing Day is in December. The vast majority of kids these days do sign in December, but there's still a good percentage that will wait until February, and especially dudes that don't have a rock-solid idea of exactly where they want to be. They're willing to wait it out an extra couple months, decline to enroll early, get on campus with their school of choice in June, and make sure that they're making the right decisions for themselves. And that is the situation with Dominic McKinley. Again, he is still verbally committed to Texas A&M, but he pledged back in September, and it was a very different situation in College Station back in September than it is today. So Oklahoma is still pursuing, LSU is still pursuing, Texas is still pursuing. This is a race that is far from over for Dominic McKinley, but in the next 48 hours, no, I don't expect the Sooners to add anybody to their 2024 haul. They have 27 scholarship commits right now. They have 3 nationally ranked guys that are committed as walk-ons. So it's a very impressive class, ranked number 6 in the nation per our team rankings over at Rivals. Definitely a group that Oklahoma can feel good about heading into year 1 in the SEC.
This team will be on the field here in the next week or so against Arizona at the Alamo Bowl, one of the few top 15 matchups in college football bowl play. We got our feet wet this past Saturday with some bowl games. And what is our current status in regards to opt-outs? Do we know who's
right now
waiting any more decisions?
There has not been anyone that has announced publicly that they are opting out of the game. However, the expectation is that offensive tackle Tyler Guyton, widely expected to be a day 2, potential day 1 pick, he is not going to play for Oklahoma in the bowl game. And then Andrew Rame, the center, who is a projected late round draft pick, but chose to enter the draft pool a year early. He's not expected to play in the bowl game either. So you got to anybody that's in the portal, for instance, Dylan Gabriel, now that he's committed to Oregon, obviously he's not going to be around, but of the guys that have not elected to transfer and are simply weighing playing in the bowl game or getting ready for the NFL, the Sooners are not expected to have Andrew Rame or Tyler Guyton. They are expected to have fifth-year senior cornerback Woody Washington, who has not officially announced his plans, but the conventional wisdom would suggest he's going to be bound for the NFL as well. That said, his decision is not set in stone, and in the meantime, he does plan to play in the bowl game for OU.
Parker, is there a level of intrigue, whether that be for you or anyone you've talked to, or just Sooner Nation regarding, okay, this is Jackson Arnold's team, and we want to see him. This is the beginning of an era, and this is his team. This is the fresh start. This is the first game. Quality opponent. Here we go.
I mean, let's call it like it is here, Mark. Jackson Arnold being the starting quarterback is really the only reason the majority of Sooner fans care about what happens in the Alamo Bowl. Obviously, Sooner fans love Sooner football. They're going to watch the games regardless of what the stakes are. But that's really the only thing that presents any intrigue to this matchup, because realistically, heading into the SEC, heading into what will be a very pivotal offseason for Oklahoma, is 10-3 with an Alamo Bowl loss versus 11-2 with an Alamo Bowl win really are those two all that different from one another? My answer would be no. I think a lot of folks' answers would be no. Ultimately, there's not a ton at stake in this football game, but the fact that you do have the true freshman, future face of your program in Jackson Arnold taking the reins for the first time, making his first career collegiate start, that is the one thing that a ton of Sooner fans are going to tune into this game to see. Would they watch the game anyway? Most certainly they would. But there's not necessarily a calling card for this football game if it's just Dylan Gabriel for the 13th game in a row as the Sooners starting quarterback. The fact that you have the true freshman taking over, former 5-star recruit, the guy that is going to lead your program into the fray in the SEC, that is what a ton of Sooner fans are going to be hyper-focused on.
So I'll take this angle on it as well. As you assess both sides of the football, maybe is there an opportunity for anyone? Is this a big game for any individual players themselves in regards to setting themselves up for the spring and for next season playing time, to be a starter, to make more of an impact, to prove something?
Certainly. And as I evaluate who has the opportunity to really make a splash in this football game, Mark, I think you always got to be mindful of the chemistry between quarterback and receiver and how that can vary from pairing to pairing, right? And so, for instance, I think for a guy like Jacquez Petaway, who came in with Jackson Arnold, he hasn't made much of a year one impact so far necessarily, but because he's had that chemistry with Arnold going back quite a ways. You saw the exact same thing in the Alamo Bowl back in 2021 with Caleb Williams and Jalil Farouk. Those two grew up together, played football from a very early age with one another. And so when Williams took the reins and you had some of those receivers clear the floor for the Alamo Bowl, they had some portal guys, had some draft bound opt-outs. Farouk got the opportunity to shine a little more, and Caleb Williams was actively looking his way. I wonder who Jackson Arnold is going to be actively looking to versus who Dylan Gabriel might actively look to. Who's going to be Arnold's go-to guy as he's processing and making the reads, because it'll inevitably be different than what Dylan Gabriel would be looking for.
Parker, if you can take yourself back 3 months to the outset of this season, is there anything about this team, any particular players, units that surprised you, whether that's from a negative standpoint or a positive standpoint in regards to the way the season went and how this program has progressed?
I was impressed by the play of the secondary, Mark, because so often in years past that has been a major bugaboo for Oklahoma, the play in the defensive backfield. And it hasn't been for lack of talent either. They've had NFL caliber players, future draft picks in the secondary time and again over the years. And for whatever reason, it just hasn't materialized collectively into high-end play in the defensive backfield. And so this was really the first year that I've covered the team. I've covered them for several years, but and not decades, obviously. This is the first Oklahoma team that I can recall offhand, Mark, where the secondary was not a liability. The Sooners held up in the back end defensively. Billy Bowman, obviously one of the most productive and impactful safeties in the entire country, was certainly snubbed as a Thorpe Award finalist. Whether or not he deserved the award, that's highly subjective, but the stats, the resume would indicate, okay, he deserved to be one of the guys that was a finalist for the Thorpe. They got excellent play from Woody Washington. Gentry Williams, when healthy, was in lockdown mode at cornerback. And then Peyton Bowen, as a true freshman, made some plays. That other safety position, Robert Spears Jennings, as a sophomore, really emerged down the stretch as well. The secondary played quite well for Oklahoma, and I recall going into the season, that was one of my major question marks for this team. Not necessarily because it wasn't there on paper, because it was, but how many years in the past had it been there on paper for Oklahoma in the secondary, and it just hadn't resulted in high caliber play regardless. So I would say that is my biggest lasting impression as far as a group that pleasantly surprised in terms of their overall level of performance.
Parker, if you had a chance to dissect the 2024 schedule, so the SEC released everyone's schedule for the next season, 3-4 days ago. What I find interesting here is coming off of a non-conference schedule that really presented little, although SMU did turn out to be the American Conference champions and came that close, and many thought that they should have been rewarded with that group of 5 slot in the New Year's Six. You've got a familiar game here against Tulane. Houston, obviously a common opponent in years past, and ships passing in the night in regards to Big 12 membership, and the opener against Temple. So there's the non-conference slate, Parker. I don't know if we've had this conversation in the past in regards to what you believe Oklahoma's mission should be, or if they do have an obvious mission in terms of what they're trying to accomplish with non-conference scheduling.
Yeah, it's not a super engaging non-conference schedule in 2024, but if Willie Fritz doesn't leave Tulane for that Houston job, I think you can make the argument that Tulane matchup is actually super intriguing. And obviously, when you schedule Houston as a non-conference opponent, however long ago that was, Mark, didn't really anticipate that Houston was going to be on a downward trajectory as a program, because they were on the up and up there for quite a while, whether that was under Tom Herman or Dana Holgerson. It looked for a brief window there as if Houston had something that they could build upon. And obviously the Power 5 transition was supposed to be huge for that program in terms of being able to establish dominance over their recruiting base. But looking at that non-con, look, Temple's a win, obviously. Houston and Tulane should be wins, but I think there's been a lot of air taken out of that matchup, or those two matchups, really, than if you evaluated them a year ago at this time, Mark, because a year ago, Houston's coming off a 10-win season. Tulane is about to play in a New Year's Six Bowl against USC. And so you're looking at those two games and going, man, I think those are two teams that at the very least can hold their own, right? Maybe they don't pull the upset over Oklahoma, but they can come to Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium and be able to put up a fight. Now, in the post-Willie Fritz era at Tulane, we have no idea what that program is going to look like. And quite conveniently, the job that Fritz left Tulane for is the Houston job. How quickly can he get things in working order down there? That remains to be seen as well. So, all in all, that's a non-conference schedule that realistically Oklahoma should be able to blaze through with a 3-0 record.
And then at least what we've done here, Parker, is every time a conference releases the entire schedule for the next season, and more so with the Big Ten and the SEC, obviously with the significant changes in the conference, with significant, brand programs coming into the conference, it's a much different look for Oklahoma. For Oklahoma, it's just a stark contrast. It's just completely different schedule. What we've done with the existing SEC and Big Ten teams is try to match up. Okay, this is what the format has given us and given this team through the years. And now, if you supplant what the format has been with what it's going to be in the future, this is how much more difficult it is for Tennessee, for Arkansas, for whomever, and tried to replace the formats to see how much it's been upgraded. Obviously, for Oklahoma, it's just a completely different schedule. But in regards to what they gave Oklahoma this first year, is there anything that stands out in particular?
No, not really. Like, honestly, Mark, this is a pretty run-of-the-mill SEC schedule. It's not murderer's row, and
Yep.
it's also not a cakewalk, right? You don't have Vanderbilt, and you don't have Georgia. And to be honest, I'm not sure we'll have a very stable read on any of these opponents until we get through the portal cycle and figure out what some of these teams add and subtract via that medium. Because, for instance, Auburn, I mean, what Auburn team are you going to get next year? Are you going to get the team that got throttled at home by New Mexico State, or are you going to get the team that came within a 4th and 31 prayer the very next week of upsetting a future college football playoff team in Alabama? And a lot of that could be contingent upon what that program does in the transfer portal. So looking at that schedule, I think there's a very realistic possibility that Oklahoma is 5-0 heading into the Red River Shootout. They get Tennessee at home. With how streaky Auburn has been, again, that is a highly winnable matchup at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And then the back half is where things start to get trickier. You have that SEC cupcake first weekend in November in the Maine Black Bears, but that is sandwiched in between road trips to Vaught Hemingway in Oxford, and then, of course, a familiar trip up to Columbia to take on the Missouri Tigers. The last 2 games are brutal, man. The last 2 games of that schedule, you get LSU and Alabama back to back. You get the Crimson Tide at home, but then Thanksgiving weekend, you got to go down to Baton Rouge. Gumbo on Thanksgiving, Mark. And those are 2 teams that are going to be nationally competitive as they are year in and year out. And I think that right there is your welcome to the SEC moment. If you haven't already felt it by late November, you're going to feel it with that 2-game stretch against the Tide and the Tigers.
And so, with the SEC announcing that each team has, I believe, 3 permanent opponents, and for Oklahoma, that's, of course, Texas, they're reestablishing the Missouri. I don't know if we want to call it rivalry. I don't know that it is on the Oklahoma side, but it's going to be a continued series, of course, against Mizzou. And then Florida, which is an interesting, just kind of plucked out of nowhere, I guess. But the permanent opponents, do you have any thoughts there?
Assuming it is Texas, Missouri, and Florida, I think the former 2 make a ton of sense. Obviously, you got to have Texas on the calendar every year. Missouri, there is history there between those 2 programs. Oklahoma has dominated the series historically, but even so, it is a familiar old Big 12 matchup that plenty of fans, especially of the nostalgic type, will be able to get behind. And as far as the Florida matchup, I understand that one does kind of feel random, right? Like it does just kind of feel thrown in there. But those 2 programs have history too. The 2008 BCS National Championship matchup. And as somebody that has been to multiple games at both the Swamp and Owen Field in Norman, Oklahoma, or I think those are 2 fan bases that I think will clash very well and make this a fun new SEC type of rivalry series. So I like that. I like OU Florida being an annual game if that is indeed what it becomes.
And then, unless they lock into something here, the SEC, like the other conferences, are big into that final weekend being rivalry weekend. They had LSU and Arkansas paired together for years and years and years after Arkansas joined the conference in 92. Then when Mizzou joined the conference, suddenly LSU and Arkansas was not a thing. And they paired Mizzou, trying to integrate them into the SEC and into SEC culture. Mizzou and Arkansas has been the thing on Black Friday. But there doesn't appear to be a pairing for Oklahoma since the Texas game is so entrenched in the state fair and in October that I guess this final game is just going to be a random scheduling situation for the Sooners.
Yeah. And this is one of the primary questions I have going forward in the SEC is, okay, how, like, realistically, how do you accommodate from a scheduling perspective, how do you accommodate 16 teams long term and find a solution that everybody is content with? Because I do think, like, the system that they have implemented right now, it makes the most sense, right? You play everybody at least every other year. You have permanent opponents, at least what has been floated / reported to be the case regarding how the SEC is going to handle scheduling. I tend to like it, but even so, I feel like there's going to be at least an opponent or two, Mark, where you're like, man, really wish Oklahoma could play those guys every single year as opposed to every other year. And then, you get the cupcake matchup in November. I'm curious to see what Oklahoma fans think of that in the long run, because that is something that if you're not an SEC program, if you are a fan of a non-SEC program, that's likely something you've taken SEC opponents to task for in the past. Oh, you're just playing some FCS also ran in the middle of November. Yeah, real competitive, right? Best conference in the country. That's probably something that you've given the SEC flack for in years past. Well, now Oklahoma fans stand to benefit, I suppose, from it. It's nice to have what amounts to an extra bye week when you're playing such a meat grinder of a schedule. But by the same token, it doesn't do much to inflate your resume either.
And with this being what is probably going to be close to what Oklahoma sees every year, I'm not saying that Alabama and LSU is going to be the conclusion every season to that degree, but it's going to be something in that realm, coming off of Ole Miss and Mizzou and whomever was before that, and then staring at Alabama and LSU. It's not necessarily, I don't know that for as much as, various fan bases across the country, including the ones that we talk to every day, take shots at the SEC's scheduling approach. Once you become a fan of one of those fan bases that go through 3 or 4 consecutive games like that, and then are staring at 2 like that at the end, then it becomes more of a valid defense that we need this break and it's deserved.
Yeah, I mean, that's and no doubt intellectually, in terms of rationalizing it as a fan of a new SEC school, whether that's Oklahoma or Texas, you're going to get to that point, right? You're going to get to that point where you're like, well, we play such a hard schedule as it is. We deserve a cupcake in November. So even if it is something that you've been critical of Alabama or Georgia or LSU over in the past, it's going to become part of the new norm for you as well.
Yes, and another part of the new norm is what we're going to see in the next 10 days or so, and Oklahoma, Arizona is just another example of it. One team taking on another team that's leaving the league and playing a team that's entering the league. Just strange happenings in college football all around. Parker, thank you so much for dropping by. Certainly want to give you the floor to let everyone know what's going on this week at Rivals and at KREF.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge week, folks, over at OUinsider.com, as we're now on the precipice of early signing day. There's going to be a ton of exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. We're going to be doing a signing day special over on our YouTube channel, a 3-hour live show with several of the signees to be. That'll be live from Sooner Daiquiri in Norman. So if you have any interest in stopping by live to see some of the commits / signees, I don't know what they'll be at that point, but that'll be 7 to 10 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday, amidst a flurry of exclusive signing day content. We keep you updated day to day, hour by hour on all things OU football, basketball, and recruiting over at OUinsider.com. I think we got the best team of reporters in the entire market, but you're welcome to make that judgment for yourself. A membership is just a few dollars a month over at OUinsider.com on the Rivals Network. You can find me on Twitter at Parker Thune. You can listen to me via the KREF app if you're not within state lines, or if you do live in the state of Oklahoma, just find a KREF affiliate in your local market.
Parker, thank you so much for stopping by. We always appreciate it. Happy National Signing Day. And if we don't see you in the meantime, Merry Christmas. And always appreciate you stopping by.
Likewise, Mark. I appreciate you. Take care.
Awesome stuff, as always, from Parker Thune. You can catch him, of course, on OU Insider, on Rivals, and KREF Sports. Speaking of which, National Signing Day coming up in 2 days. Listen to this, folks. On the main channel, we are going live at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We will have reports coming in from Virginia, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Oklahoma State, Oregon. We will have our regular shows from Florida State, Miami. We've got Ohio State, Penn State, Clemson, and Iowa on the docket to be scheduled as well. So again, all sorts of reports coming in here at the Voice of College Football. So over the span, especially, of course, National Signing Days on Wednesday, but some of it's going to spill over into Thursday to get all these reports in from various media members across the board. Ole Miss, Virginia, Kentucky, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa. So please tune in for that. And we're still adding more right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Check out the SEC channel. So we are simulcasting right now on the SEC channel. And for those of you watching on SG1 Sports Oklahoma, certainly we want to let you know that Chris does a great job with SG1 Sports, and check out his content here and across the SG1 Sports platform. But make sure that you subscribe to the SEC channel. You check us out there. This show will simulcast over on the SEC channel going forward. You can get the link in the description section of all the videos. I'm actually going to go and drop that down right now. And again, National Signing Day. We're going to be live basically all day somewhere, mostly on the main channel. So please check us out there. And we're going to drop the SEC channel link so you can follow it right there to all the content we provide on the SEC channel. Let me get us set up here before I check out some comments. There we go. In the chat section, you've got the SEC channel link. Follow us there. What's coming in from all of you? We've got Steven. Yes, we talked about the Sharp commitment. If you're just joining us, Parker Thune talked about the Sharp commitment off the top. Appreciate Mars Jams 2 being here. Jimmy as well. Michael, thank you so much for being here. Gerald as well. And there we are, right here at the Voice of College Football. Again, join us on National Signing Day over on the main channel. We're going to be live most of the day. And our next show is coming up at 6 Eastern today, 6 Eastern, the Big Ten Live show. USC Live is coming up at 11 p.m. Eastern time tonight, 10 Central, over on the USC channel. So 2 more live streams today. Albeit if there's breaking news, we're always apt to go live here at the Voice of College Football. But as it stands right now, 6 p.m. Eastern time, the Big Ten Live show, 11 p.m. Eastern time, Trojan Conquest Live over on the USC channel. We will see you soon.